Welcome to Crow's Shiny Things. This is episode 2, and I'm Crow, or Wade, your host for today. It's mid-January. That means we're at the start of ProQuest season for 2022. I'm judging an event next week, and I'm excited about the season in general. I wanted to talk today about how organized play in general can be incredibly fun process for us, the casual fans, to engage with. So I hope you'll stick around and talk with me about it. So all day yesterday, I sat around and watched MinMax Games ProQuest on the first weekend of ProQuest season. These were some fantastic games. They were really fun casting with Flake and DM Armada. It was an all-day event. I watched off and on throughout the day. And it was really exciting for me because Azalea made top 8 with Levi Roush piloting. And we got to see the top 8 game of Azalea versus Dash. And all I could think about was that one of the people in my local playgroup that sits around our table plays Dash, I play Azalea, and here was that matchup with some really great and talented players. Getting to show me kind of the pinnacle of how this can be played. Lovely match. I was kind of gutted for the result, but it was really fun to watch, and I'm glad I got to see it. I loved watching that. This whole day of watching, though, is kind of why I want to talk about ProQuest and really about the organized play pathways in general, because I don't think most of it has much to do with a casual's playstyle or a casual's approach to the game. I think that most of this is really something that is not anything we're going to engage with directly as a player. But that doesn't mean that we can't get something out of it. We can't have a lot of fun with it. To use a very common analogy, I don't have to play in professional sports to enjoy watching professional sports or to want to go to an event every now and then. That doesn't make me a professional. It doesn't make me somebody who wants to be a professional. It makes me somebody who's a fan of the game. And I think that's kind of a really healthy way to look at the organized play pathway. So, yeah, let's take a look at it, because my point in sharing that these events are fantastic following along in your spare time, once you kind of figure out how the organized play works, there's this wealth of content that is very accessible and fun for the casual player and viewer. And given that so many events are live streamed and then just available for replay, means that much like any other style of competitive sport or event, there's a great back catalog of really fantastic high-level games that we can go look up, sort of take apart, view at our leisure, have some fun with. And I think that for anyone who's learning the game, who is invested in the game, who just enjoys playing, there's a lot of value in that. There's a lot of fun in it. Like I said, for me, I watched them all day yesterday. And I didn't sit and watch it all 100% all the way through. But I did sit and watch them in between doing other things, or while doing research at my computer, or in between games, go and get some errands done, etc. It's a great way to interact with that. In addition to that, once you start paying attention to this process, this whole organized pathway, and more importantly, to the larger community of Flesh and Blood that it represents and that engage with it, meaning professional players, the casters who bring all of the color commentary to life for us, the deck builds and the metagames that change from event to event. Once you start paying attention to those things, they're really very easy to keep up with. Getting into it at first is maybe a bit overwhelming and a bit much, but once you kind of understand it, it really gives a whole new avenue of fun to pay attention to these events and to see what's happening. It was really no mistake that it was so exciting for me to watch Levi Roush on Azalea. He has made a name for himself playing Azalea consistently and competitively for the last year plus. And I've watched his content and his events through that whole time. So now, as a casual player, to be able to watch and see somebody who I have followed to get to that top 8 point, to push Azalea so close to getting her first Living Legend points. I mean, we're still waiting for those points to come across in CC. She's already got 4 points in, I think it's 4 points in Blitz. That's fantastic. I want to root for him. He's been a consistent advocate for my favorite hero. I want to root for my hero to win and do well. I want to see him succeed with it. And at the end of it, I want that deck because I want to see how well he did with something that I've messed around with a lot. You know, he's clearly going to make some different choices from what I've made. I know that already. But looking at his deck and then being able to go more directly look up some of the materials that he's put out for it, because a lot of these players who are playing at the top end are also producing content, and it makes it easy for us sitting at home to follow along and use their lead to help us get better. And just because I'm casual does not mean that I don't want to get better at the game. I do. I play this game as much as I can, and I want to get as good as I can get at it. So seeing these high-level play pieces are a great way to see the mistakes that maybe I'm making in my day-to-day play. So I thought maybe we could take a look at the organized play structures and see what it is set up as and how we as casual players can take a look at those structures and make some sense out of them and maybe get the most out of them. Yeah, so let's take a look. This is Flesh and Blood's organized play layout for 2023. These were all released earlier this year in an article that is on Flesh and Blood's website. You can see it listed up here. OP 2023. It's still in the articles on the front page right now. It'll eventually fall below that. This is very close to what they originally released for organized play, although it does have a few tweaks that are different. So as a casual player, there are a few conceits right off the bat. First, World Tour, Pro Tour, National Championships. That's not something I'm really interested in ever engaging with as a player. It might be nice to go to them, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but I'm never going to go and think to myself, hey, I want to compete in a Pro Tour or a World Championship or National Championship. It's just not what I do. It's not what I want. That's a level of competition and preparation and stress that, frankly, I just don't have time for. Now, sure, might it be nice at some point? Yeah, great. But I don't think that time is coming anytime soon. that means top 2 tiers, I don't have to worry about any of that except as a spectator. As a spectator, what those represent to me are opportunities to do exactly what I was just talking about. Watch players that I have paid attention to, play the heroes that I know, love, and or hate, and get closer and closer to living legend with those heroes. That process is really, I think, engaging. It's interesting. It's fun. But it's not going to involve me playing at that level. Now, with this announcement, they made it clear that they're splitting the year into 3 seasons. Each one of the seasons has a top-level capstone event. The first one up is the ProTour, which is happening in Baltimore this year. It was announced not too long ago. So we are currently in ProTour season, and all of the events will be leading up to ProTour. So if we look down a little bit farther, we can see at Tier 2 we have the ProQuest here, and indeed the Battle Hardens. These are all going to feed into, at the moment, ProTour. That means I don't really care about these either as a player, right? I could enjoy getting to that game and playing with the people who I enjoy playing with. And that's totally legit. Do not ever take my stance that casuals don't really get a whole lot out of these things as an excuse that you shouldn't go and engage with them, because I think you should, right? If you enjoy playing and you want to play with people at a higher level, by all means, go. Just be aware of what it is, that the ultimate prize for those events is to get an invite to the capstone for that season. Right? If I'm going to a ProQuest, the main reason to go is to get that invite to the ProTour. If I don't want that ProTour invite, then really what I'm going for is the experience of the play and whatever participation prize they have, which is not nothing. Currently, it's a metal token resource counter, which I almost signed up for a ProQuest just to go get that counter. And that's worth noting. It's worth remembering that that's a thing, that some people will go do that. My only caveat there is that if you aren't going to that ProTour, please be mindful and considerate of the other people there who are trying to go to that ProTour, that your play is on the ball, you are working at that competitive tier of enforcement, and you're aware of those changes. It's different than playing around the kitchen table. And maybe later I'll do a whole episode on that difference, but just be aware of that so that you can be polite in that space and get something really good out of it, right? Because the gameplay is fantastic. So it's lovely to go and get the gameplay out of it, but you just don't want to, you want to make sure that you are not being a distraction or a problem in that space. And I think that would probably be my biggest fear as somebody who's more of a casual player coming into that space. Am I going to be the one that's slowing things down? Am I going to be the one that is like, oh, I misplayed all this thing and now it's a problem? That's probably just, fears of doing the wrong social thing, but it's easily avoided if you just keep in mind that no, my end goal here is not to get into this final ProTour. My end goal here is to have a good time, play some games, and experience the environment. Anyway, because of all that, Tier 2, Tier 3, we'll talk about the call-in in a minute, and Tier 4 largely not something that I engage with on a direct basis as a player. I'm just not interested. That's most of the OP pathway, OP being organized play. It does leave this tier 1, which is really fantastic. Sorry if I glance over here, I have my other screen up with, this is where I'm looking at it. So, skirmish armory events pre-release. These really are some of the bread and butter things that I think casual players should be aimed at, and specifically armory events and pre-release events. If you've never been to a pre-release event, you owe it to yourself to go to one of them. There's so much more fun than really almost any other event I've been to. I just adore the fact that everybody's on the same page for most of it. You have access to as much information as anyone else does. While other people may have more experience in general in playing, they don't have any more experience with these cards typically, because you're at the earliest or almost the earliest that anybody can play them. That tends to level things a little bit, and it makes for super fun engagement. So I highly recommend, if you get an opportunity to go to a pre-release event for Flesh and Blood, do yourself a favor, sign up, find your local store and sign up for that event, and try it out, because I don't think you'll be disappointed. And at the very least, you go home with cards from the new set. So pre-releases, those are top of my list. I try and go to every one that I can. And I will set time aside that weekend to try and go to multiples if possible. I'm lucky. I live in Atlanta, and there are, I can go to events very often here if I want. That's a privilege, and so I'm thankful for it. But regardless, find out which of your local stores are having them. Try and get that time. Try and go and indulge yourself a little bit. I don't think you'll be sorry about it. Those are pretty rare though, right? We only have 3-4 boxes releasing in a year, so you're gonna have 3-4 pre-releases. Super fun time, but they're not common. Armory events every week. Do yourself a favor, find out what stores near you hold armory events, even if you never plan on going to it. Find out where they all are and when. If you're lucky, they have a regular schedule of them. I say find out because I know for myself, my time is limited, and I often cannot schedule that I'm going to go to these things. I just can't. My job basically gets to where I'm really tired at the end. I don't want to go out and be with other people, or I've got some other engagement I have to be at, and I just can't make it to a regular thing. So I tend to keep in mind the general schedule of all the armory events in town. And then when I have time, I think about, well, can I make one tonight? Where is it tonight? Can I go 20 minutes, 30 minutes, right? Maybe wife's out of the house for the evening, or my daughter's not here, or something canceled. Sometimes it still doesn't work. But if you're interested in going out, meeting the people who play around you, developing a relationship with the local game stores, just getting play time, then you owe it to yourself to try and go to an armory event every now and then. They are the lowest rung of engagement with the organized pathway, and they're the easiest to get involved with. because it's usually just show up and then they fire the events that night if everybody is there, if they have enough. There's almost always some kind of a card that you get as a prize. There's usually a mat or two, and your store will have different rules for who and how they give that mat away. A lot of the times, one of the 2 mats is given away as a raffle on one of the nights. It's worth knowing that, right? If you want those mats, you can't win them if you're not there for those nights of the raffle. Anyway, highly encourage you to discover the Armory events calendar around you and try and go to one in a month, right? Just pick a number that you can do. Maybe it's only one in every other month. That's okay. Do not worry about that. Just try and make some time to go to one. And if you're a new player, especially, try and get to one. I went to one this past Friday. I only get to about one a month, and a buddy of mine and I at the last minute were like, hey, I'm free, let's go. We drove, as I said, I'm in Atlanta. I drove forever, it feels like. Showed up, we played for the evening. I got in 3 good games, had an excellent night. It felt so good to play against other people. End of the night, they gave away packs as prizes, and pretty much every player there, except for one, was an experienced player who had every card that they needed. They opened their packs, looked to see if there was anything they wanted, and then just handed all of the other cards to that new player. That player walked away with a good stack of about 10 or 12 packs worth of cards for the cost of entry in an armory. Now, they're not going to be probably the top cards, because if you open CNC or something like that, they're probably going to keep it. But if you don't have much and you're just looking to build your collection, those cast-offs actually can help to build to other heroes that maybe you don't have. This other one here, Skirmish, is worth noting. They have a couple skirmish seasons every year. The skirmish seasons are all blitz. And that's kind of a mixed blessing. Blitz can be very accessible, but it can also be highly competitive. Because it's so fast, if you're playing with people who are really geared towards winning, those games can be less than satisfying. But Blitz as a format is very easy to get into because you don't need as many cards, right? It's just simpler to get the cards for it. So it's worth experimenting to try and deal with, trying a skirmish or two. There's usually 2 to 3. I think it's maybe 1 per season. I think this year it's, let's see if they list it. Yeah, this year we're going to have 2 of them, right? We're going to have, here you go, Skirmish Season 6 here somewhere in the March to June, and Skirmish Season 7 in July, September. So twice we will be having skirmishes this year. Worth paying attention to, right? If you enjoy Blitz, give it a shot. If not, don't worry about it. All right, that leads me to the last piece here, this calling. Callings are an odd piece, and realistically, this goes for all 4 of these. World Championship, National Championship, Calling, Pro Tour, and Battle Hardened to a lesser extent. All of these events are usually big events, at least here in the United States, where they have a lot of side small tournament things happening at the same time. Now, what that means is that if you can get to a calling, for instance, or really World Championship, Pro Tour, or National Championship, even if you're not going to play in that event, if it's easy to get there, you might want to think about going, especially if you can find a friend to go with. Because I will tell you, having now been to the calling in Indianapolis, it was Cincinnati? Ugh, I've lost track of time. I went to one a year ago or so. It was fantastic, and I highly recommend it. But I didn't care about the main event that much, right? I even played in the calling main event, but that was not. There were 600 people in that event. I did not expect to do well. I went in enjoying my time, and I had a great time because of it. But I didn't go in with a preconceived notion of I've got to hit this many wins or this many losses. I ended up going 50-50 on the day and counted that as a considerable win for me. But the real joy of this event was actually all of the side events that we did. My buddy and I went and we did several draft events. We did several, that was Tales of Aria, by the way. So we did Tales of Aria draft probably 2-3 times, maybe. Yeah, I think it was about 3. We played in some CC side events, some Blitz side events. Most of our time was spent in those side events, not in the main tourney. It was fantastic. It was much lower stress. It was fun to sit down across from the people in there because everyone else was also just there for the good fun of it. I met a lot of people. I collected a ton of cards. I had a great time walking around looking at the vendors. It was a fantastic convention experience focused on Flesh and Blood. I highly recommend it. Highly. You're going to get that experience on any of these top 4 event tiers. So far, Battle Hardens have not equated to that, although with the number of Battle Hardens they're doing in 2023, each one of those may vary, and they may have more side event style things. So that may be changing, and if there's one close to you, it may be worth going to just for the side events. ProQuest, that's not really going to be a thing. These are all going to be hosted at local stores. I wouldn't really concern yourself with it that much. Road to Nats is going to be very similar to the ProQuest in that sense. Held at the stores with an end goal specifically of getting an invitation to this national championship event. It's not about side events or anything like that. Again, could be interesting to go to, but if you're not going to the national championship, probably not the thing you're looking for. Hopefully, that gives you a good idea of how I, as a casual player, interact with all of these levels. Right? Most of the things up here, I spectate. I watch. I'm looking for the storylines. I want to see Zach Bunn and Michael Hamilton in the Wolfpack take on various comers and see how well do they all do. I want to see Brendan Patrick and Hayden Dale from Arsenal Pass and see what they're bringing. And do they try and pull a Kano stunt again, like they did for the first ProTour? Stuff like that is interesting, and I think it's a lot of fun to watch. So as a spectator, love it. If you can get to them and they're near you when they happen, great. Go to one of these things. It's a fun convention. But treat it kind of like the vacation time that it is, right? You're going to go and you're going to play and you're going to just get in a lot of games. You're going to play stuff on the side. You're going to play card games in the hotel lobby. You're going to stay up late at night talking card games in the hotel lobby. That's the kind of event that's going to be for any one of these 4. Well worth it, but maybe not everybody's thing. This tier in particular, probably not for us. Down here, skirmish, possibly, depending. Do you like blitz? Armory and pre-release, that's the sweet spot. Whenever you can get to an armory, great. Whenever you can go to a pre-release, fantastic. Past that, we're not concerned. Anyway, that's my take on the larger picture of the pathways to organized play. It's going to be a super fun year for organized play, I think. The structure that they've given it this year makes a lot of sense. And as someone who is watching all of this stuff, I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Next week, I'm actually going to a ProQuest, but I'm going as a judge. And I think that I will talk about that next week, about judging, maybe next week, about judging and about why I decided to be a judge and how I think about judging as someone who is not competing at that level all the time. Because I do have a rationale for why I do this, and I get a lot out of it, but it's not going to be everybody's thing. So anyway, till next week, thank you.